Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Survivor Strong, the podcast where we talk all things related to child sexual abuse, incest, and trauma. I'm so happy to have you here. I've missed everyone over these past couple of weeks. I just want to thank everyone so much for joining me live tonight on Fireside Chat, as well as Facebook Live, where you can be part of the conversation as my virtual audience. I'm your host, Yvonne Sandomir. And again, as a reminder, everyone has an opportunity to ask me any questions by requesting to hop on stage or by just sending a message in the chat box. So tonight, the show is going to be a little bit differently. I'm going to do something a little bit different. Tonight, I want to talk about how overturning Roe versus Wade will negatively affect victims of sexual abuse, incest, and sexual assault. Now, past episodes have been very positive and encouraging, but tonight I have to tell you I'm angry and frankly, I'm terrified. It's been less than 2 weeks since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and I have to tell you, I'm still appalled. I'm still appalled about the lack of protection for victims of incest and rape. Today, as I was back on June 24th when this all started. To start, Psychology Today accurately states that survivors of sexual violence aren't the only ones who will be negatively impacted by Roe versus Wade being overturned. Yet many trauma survivors will, without a doubt, be triggered, frightened, and even re-traumatized by being deprived of agency over integral aspects of their lives and well-being. Trauma survivors need to experience both bodily and relational agency to support their recovery. Overturning Roe versus Wade severely restricts agency and thus sabotages survivors' chances of recovering from that trauma. Now, you may or may not know that traumatic responses often occur when a person is denied agency over an impactful event, life situation, or component of their identity and flourishing. Agency is essential to recovering from trauma because trauma largely involves a profound loss, a destabilization, or suppression of agency. Curtailing a trauma survivor's agency after their traumatic experience can have harmful devastating effects on their recovery. Overturning Roe versus Wade sharply limits the agency of those who are able to get pregnant. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified that trauma survivors will be forced to live and recover in a world where their agency is gravely and cruelly limited. So let's talk about agency for a moment. Lack of bodily agency threatens our children. Children are often taught, usually, and I talk about this all the time, usually implicitly, that they do not have agency over their bodies. Again, by typically, we encourage our children to hug and kiss relatives on command. For example, I've talked about this multiple times, thus teaching them that adults get to decide what happens to their bodies. What are we communicating to our children by overturning Roe versus Wade? Forced birth really perpetuates pervasive trauma. And another website that I recently was doing some research on is Amnesty International. And they reported in 2020 that forced pregnancy is a serious violation of sexual and reproductive rights and autonomy, which can cause severe physical and psychological harms. And often, it has lasting personal, social, and economic consequences for the victim. At the end of the day, I'm absolutely terrified for the innocent children and women who may be forced to bear the children of their rapists, to bear the children of their uncles, fathers, grandfathers, cousins, or brothers in the case of incest. I'm infuriated for the 10-year-old rape victim that was 6 weeks pregnant and denied an abortion in her home state of Ohio less than 24 hours ago. Her family was forced to travel to Indiana to ensure that their child received proper health care. Can you imagine that? Think about that for a second. How did this happen in the United States of America? In what universe is it okay or fair to a victim of rape or incest to be denied the option to end that traumatic pregnancy? Isn't everyone entitled to choose when and how they become a parent? So you're telling me that not only can the perpetrator force sex upon a woman or child or underage teen, leaving their victim with no choice to have sex or not, but now the government wants to punish that victim even further with forced births? Why would we want a child produced through incest to be born? These pregnancies possess a high risk of premature birth and producing infants who are likely to be inflicted with physical deformities and genetically inherited diseases. How is this in the best interest of the child in the long run? It's shameful to me. I really find it shameful. And to be clear, I need to clarify something here. I am not pro murdering babies. I am pro a woman's right to choose. And, let me tell you, because I was given that opportunity. Back in 2001, I have to tell you, I was nowhere near the woman I am today. I looked for love in all the wrong places. And sadly, it didn't matter if I was in a relationship or not. At the time, I was in a relationship for 3 years and I went outside of that relationship. This landed me in some pretty hot water when I found out I was pregnant and I didn't know who the father was. I had a choice to make. My partner at the time asked me if an abortion was an option for me. And right then and there, I made it clear that it wasn't. That baby was a part of me. And now, it was a part of me now, and we'd either move forward together or go our separate ways. And, we moved forward together, and about 9 months later, my beautiful daughter was born. Deciding to keep my pregnancy was easy. I made the same choice in 2004, and now I have 2 beautiful daughters. I've never terminated a pregnancy, and I never would, but that's my choice. I can't hold other women to my beliefs, nor can you? Now, I'm not here to debate when life begins, but I am here to debate why people think they can project their personal or spiritual beliefs onto others. You don't believe in abortion? That's fine. Don't have one. Do you believe the child should be put up for adoption? That's great. But did you know that there are currently 424,000 children in the foster system, over which 122,000 of these kids are eligible for adoption right now? Why isn't anyone adopting these children? These are the same children that were told, "Hey, give your child up for adoption, you'll give them a better life." 122,000 kids right now are able to be adopted. Where are all of the people, the pro-lifers out there, beating down these orphanages and trying to adopt these children who need families? Um, it's sad. And, you may not even know this, but according to The Atlantic, only 18,000 babies are voluntarily given up for adoption at birth each year. That's 18,000 babies. There's already 122,000 children waiting to be adopted today. The bigger question is really, why do you think adoption is a better option for the child? I know people who are adopted who say being given up at birth is a trauma. You're an unwanted kid waiting for someone to pick you out like produce at the grocery store, making sure you're the right fit, you're just ripe enough, the right color, the right age, the right this. And being adopted doesn't guarantee any child will have a good life. The child welfare system, or the Child Welfare Information Gateway, rather, reports that a recent study in Atlanta showed that 34% of adopted children experience some type of abuse or mistreatment. So we are not guaranteeing children a better life by, forcing these young mothers who don't want to be pregnant or the victims of sexual assault and rape, forcing these women to carry these children and planting this distorted belief that this child that they're going to give up, this child that they're going to give up for adoption, is guaranteed that that child is going to have a better life. And I'm just sorry to say that's not the case. And really, with all of that said, I'm not here to talk to politicians or government officials about this issue. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you, the parents, because this is where it all begins. And I want to say hi to Stitch, who just joined us, who is a Survivor Strong favorite. Hi, Stitch. I'm going to invite you to join if you want to speak, but I'm going to mute you for a little bit while I kind of go through my spiel here, if I will. But this is where it all begins. The first thing is, parents, we must comprehend that any child under the age of 18 is not mentally or psychologically prepared to give consent. I understand the legal age is younger. Oh, let me mute you, Stitch. I'm going to mute you for just a second. I understand the legal age is younger in some states, and that is part of the problem. StopItNow.org beautifully explains why permission from a child or underage teen just doesn't count. And it states, and I'm going to tell you this verbatim, quote, "The law recognizes that children are developmentally not able to make decisions about some things, including when to engage in sexual behaviors. Laws vary by state, but a common age of consent is 16. Engaging in sexual behaviors with someone under the age of consent is illegal and will be treated as criminal sexual conduct." It goes on to say, even if a child or underage teen gives permission or acts willingly, this never implies consent. A child is never accountable. A child's permission or even a request to play some type of sexual touching or watching game never and I mean never, excuses the adult or teen from taking full responsibility of that younger person for that interaction. It is always the adult's responsibility to set boundaries with children and underage teens. Sometimes people justify their sexual activity with children by saying the child wanted it or the child touched them first. They may misread a child's affection as sexual. They may tell themselves, oh, age is nothing but a number. Or they look older and they act a little bit older, so it's okay. It's important that as parents, if someone you know is unclear about boundaries with children, you have to remind them of their responsibility to set the boundaries and the potentially high consequences to them if they don't. So let's talk about this for a moment. I want all of you out there to think of your children. Think of your 16-year-old daughter or younger, 9, 10. She's 16. She's likely a sophomore or junior in high school with friends, extracurricular activities, goals, and lifelong dreams that she wants to accomplish. Think about that girl for a moment and ask yourself, do I allow one mistake to ruin my daughter's entire life? Teenagers are supposed to make mistakes, but unless they are 18 or older, excuse me, they cannot be held criminally responsible. And of course, there are, some exceptions of, murder and some really crazy things, but they cannot be held criminally responsible for those decisions. So how can we make them responsible for making a mistake of having sex if they're, of the age of consent, say 16 and older, or if they are underage and under consent? Oh, sorry about that. But what I want you to do is ask yourself, is forcing my child to bear a pregnancy that her body isn't prepared to carry really the right decision? I mean, why are we punishing our underage girls for their entire lives because they make the mistake of, having sex with their boyfriend, or in the case of rape and incest, they have no choice at all? I ask this, and, this may sound harsh to some, but, I just got to tell you, this is my truth. I have two beautiful daughters. My oldest daughter is 20, and my youngest is 17. She'll be 18 in December. And I'm here to tell you that if either of my daughters came to me with an accidental pregnancy, and or especially if they were victims of rape or incest, I would advocate for an abortion. And that isn't because I don't value life. It's because I value the life of my daughter standing in front of me way more than an accidental pregnancy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I look forward to being a grandmother one day, but only when my children are mature enough for the responsibility of being a parent. I want my daughters to experience life, to have all the opportunities afforded to them. I want them to follow their dreams and reach for their goals. I just don't see how insisting on an underage teen becoming a parent is teaching them a lesson. And I've heard that so much, growing up in the South. These underage girls get pregnant. Well, that'll teach them a lesson. Well, no, that's not going to teach them a lesson. It's going to ruin their life. I mean, what point does that prove at all? Nothing. All it really does is it creates more unwanted children who will end up being abused, neglected, and forgotten about in our society. And, and I implore you all to open your minds about the reality of abortion. Amnesty.org reports these basic facts about abortion. Reversing Roe versus Wade will not stop abortions. The abortion rate is 37 per 1,000 people in countries that prohibit abortion altogether or allow it only in instances to save a woman's life, and 34 per 1,000 people in countries that broadly allow for abortion. Obviously, it's a difference that's not very significant. Criminalizing abortion does not stop abortions. It just makes abortions less safe. The World Health Organization estimates that 25 million unsafe abortions take place every year. Many of them in developing countries, of course, but unsafe abortions are the third leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide and lead to an additional 5 million largely preventable disabilities. Almost every death and injury from an unsafe abortion is preventable. The WHO has noted that one of the steps toward avoiding maternal deaths and injuries is for states to ensure that people have access to sex education, are able to use effective contraceptive, and have safe and legal abortion access. And they have to be given timely care for complications. Evidence shows that abortion rates are higher in countries where there is limited access to contraception. Abortion rates are lower where people, including adolescents, have information about and can access modern contraceptive methods, and where comprehensive sexuality education is available, and there is access to safe and legal abortion on broad grounds. Criminalizing or restricting abortion prevents doctors from providing basic care that women and girls need. I have an example here. Claire Malone, a young woman from Ireland who already had 2 children, shared her harrowing testimony of how her right to health was undermined by not being able to access an abortion due to the country's strict abortion laws. Claire has a number of complex and life-threatening health conditions, including pulmonary atresia, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, and pulmonary hypertension. And she actually even had to have her lung removed in 2014. If women with pulmonary hypertension become pregnant, they are at risk of becoming even more gravely ill or dying during the pregnancy. Claire knows this, which is what led her to seek a termination, a request that was denied by her doctors because the law prevented them from doing so. She says, and I quote, "My doctor said they couldn't offer a termination as my life wasn't at risk right now. And that was it. I know they are bound by the law, but I felt like if I waited until my health got so bad that I could die, then it would be too late by then anyway. And why is a risk to my health, as bad as it already was, not enough? And how much do I have to go through before my doctors are allowed to treat me?" End quote. At the end of the day, access to safe abortion is a matter of human right. Everyone has the right to life, a right to health, and a right to be free from violence, discrimination, and torture or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. Human rights law clearly spells out that decisions about your body are yours alone. This is what is known as bodily autonomy. Forcing someone to carry on an unwanted pregnancy or forcing them to seek out an unsafe abortion is a violation of their human rights, including the right to privacy and bodily autonomy. Access to abortion is therefore fundamentally linked to protecting and upholding the rights of women, girls, and others who can become pregnant, and thus achieving social and gender justice. We must stand up for the rights of our daughters. We must fight for their right to choose their destiny and not force them to give up over a mistake, and especially not force them to give it up if they're raped or a victim of incest. This is what I'm asking you to do. Whatever you believe, please think about the child in front of you first. How will that decision impact their life, their future? I really want you, to think about it. And, I know Stitch is here. She's waiting patiently. So I'm going to welcome Stitch here. Let me unmute you. Actually, I think you can unmute yourself. If you can unmute yourself. There you are. Hi, Stitch.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on this during this pretty controversial conversation that I have going here. I'm just talking about Roe versus Wade and how it can negatively affect trauma survivors and victims of incest and rape. What are your thoughts on the issue? I know you have daughters.
I do. Actually, my oldest daughter is going to be 16 in July. And if you do a little math, I'm 33.
Hmm.
So I had her, it was either right before or right after my 17th birthday. I think it was right before my 17th birthday.
Okay.
And it was so hard. It wasn't so hard to be a mom. It was so hard to deal with what everyone was saying about me
Right.
and to me and around me. Um,
And isn't that a shame? Can I ask you, what are some of the things that people were saying, in and around you about, being pregnant at such a young age?
well, during the pregnancy, it wasn't so bad. It was mostly after, actually. I think that during, everyone was very polite. My mother's family was give or take. But after I had her, there was a lot of being told I wasn't able to, that I couldn't. Even though I was a mom, I couldn't be a mom, no
Mm.
matter what I did. And it was very difficult to deal with. My self esteem definitely plummeted during that time.
Well, can I ask you, and this may be very personal, and I apologize in advance, but I think it's important to understanding, your story. And so you became pregnant at 16. And may I ask the circumstances around that? Was it a boyfriend? Was it, um,
Funny enough, no. Actually, I was pretty isolated in high school, and I think I was at my fourth or fifth party I'd ever been to, and I ended up getting taken advantage of. He told me he was 21, and I later
oh,
found out he was 25.
okay. So right there, let me just stop you there. I need to take a breath here.
Yeah.
And and I hope that you don't take any disrespect when I say this, because I hope you know me, that none is intended whatsoever. But your pregnancy is a product of sexual assault.
Right.
And I don't know if you ever looked at it that way, or maybe you're very much aware of that.
I
um,
wasn't until a couple years ago. I think once I started going through my own process and everything, I started to realize it a lot more. But it did take
right.
me several years.
And at that time, how did your parents react to the news?
My mother was excited to be a grandma at first because, well, she's a narcissist, so everything's about her. Um,
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. These parents making these decisions for their
yeah.
children, and it's about them and not about what's really in the best interest for the child. But go on.
My dad was great. I don't think I could have done it without him,
Oh,
honestly.
really? Oh, that's so nice.
He gave me options when he first found out. He sat me down and he was just like, if you want to take care of this, I will support you, and if you want to keep it, I will support you. um so I made the choice to keep my beautiful, wonderful daughter.
Uh-huh. Of
And
course.
then he said that as long as I stay in school and work on my education, I could stay with him. So he just supported both of us financially until I finished high school, and then helped me out while I was putting myself through college too. He was amazing.
That is very amazing, and I'm so glad that you had your dad there to kind of support you through that. And and I want to make it clear too, um, for people who decide and make the choice, I admire that. To keep these children, even if it is a product of rape or incest. I honor your ability to make that choice, right? Um, and so I think it takes a very strong person to continue with a pregnancy, that's a product of sexual assault or rape or incest. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm putting them down if they choose to make that decision, because that's not the case at all. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be forced on anyone,
Right.
you know? So, so how old were you when you realized that it was a product of sexual assault?
I don't think that I came to terms with it until I was almost 30, actually. It took me a
And
really
see,
long time.
and that's what happens so much, is that because I imagine at the time you're 16, really cute older guy, you know, he took advantage of you. But I'm sure at the time you're like, oh, this is just an older guy. It's no big deal. He's only
Right,
21.
yes.
I'm 16. No big deal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
And
now
I later found out he had several other similar charges against him. So
wow.
this
Wow.
was definitely a predator.
Yes, absolutely. And did your parents ask about the father? Ask about how old he was?
Um, Kind of. I think my father just respected that I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I know that's really important. That's really important that he respected um, your boundary and where you were when it came to what you were willing to talk about and not, because that also has to be respected, right? I mean, we
Right.
can't force our kids to tell us until they're ready to tell us. Um, but it just goes to show that you don't even realize it a lot of times until after the fact. But you know I know probably going to school and keeping up with friends was difficult for you, but I mean, what other challenges did you find, you
Um,
know, from being a teen mom?
it uh it ended up really affecting my own self-esteem, and I ended up going through most of my abusive relationships in my 20s because of it. I dealt with a lot of verbal abuse. Once I finished high school,
Mm,
I lived with someone and was in a relationship, and they would go out and get drunk and turn their phone off. And, I wasn't 21 yet, so I just sat at home and waited with my little baby girl.
yeah.
And they would come home and say, well, no one's ever going to love you and no one's ever going to love that baby. It
Wow.
was a pretty constant occurrence for me. And it took about 2 years of going through that. And then it eventually led to physical abuse. And that was when it occurred to me that I should probably leave.
Mm, right. And what's your thought and opinion on overturning Roe v. Wade? Given your experience, has that affected your opinion about it at all?
Um, so I have a bit of a different opinion, and it's a bit more abstract. I mean, I do think that overturning Roe versus Wade has terrible consequences. Of course, it's horrible,
Yeah.
but I like to be optimistic about it in the sense that overturning it didn't make it illegal throughout the entire country.
Right. Just make
But
it more difficult. Yeah.
what it did was it made
Excuse
it
me.
up to the states.
Right.
So, whereas everyone always goes and votes for the president, we now have the, what's the word? We now have the responsibility of voting on the local level
Mm-hmm.
and supporting each other more locally.
Yes, yes.
So
Oh,
even though, it is horrible right now, I feel like in the long term it could be beneficial because it's teaching us all to be politically responsible.
well, I think there's one thing in being politically responsible, but it just comes down for me downright to there should be nothing political when it comes to me and my body and my choices.
Right.
You know, I think what bothers me the most about it is that there's no exception for rape or incest. There's no exception for those situations. Um, and I just feel like stripping that away makes women less human. It's not, I mean,
Oh yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you.
right? But
Hmm.
because the thing is, it's, like I was saying before, it's not going to end abortions. It's just going to end safe abortions. And what I worry about, like the situation, the example that I gave, I'm not sure if you had, hopped on by this time, but I talked about the 10-year-old rape victim recently, who was denied an abortion in Ohio. 10 years old. And they said, nope, we can't give you an abortion. She was raped, and she had to go to Indiana to get that to get the procedure that she needed. I mean, that's additional cost on the family. It's additional stress. It's additional risk. Think about now having to drive from one state to the other. You could get into an accident on the way. I mean, there's so many factors. I, I had to, make it known. I do not believe in abortion as a form of birth control.
Right.
I do not believe that, we should be waiting until 5, 6 months pregnant to make this decision. But I also understand that there are situations and circumstances where that happens. If the mom's health is an issue, or if the baby has, some issue that when they're born they won't survive.
Hmm.
I just think that there needs to be some exceptions and not just nope, nope, done.
No, I
You know,
completely agree.
I think
Absolutely.
every state should be able to provide an abortion in those situations.
Right, absolutely. And there's so many things that aren't available that should be available, and it's gotten so much worse, and it's difficult because I live in a pro-choice state, which
Hmm.
is wonderful.
Hmm.
However, our local hospital closed, and the only hospital left in the area is a private Catholic hospital. And with the hospital closing, so went our public clinic.
Yeah.
So now we cannot get birth control without driving for an hour or going to the local health department where everyone is treated lesser than.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
rude there.
Right.
So even though I live in a pro choice state, there's still so many problems. Women can't even get birth control. They can't go
Yeah.
through any type of procedures to help prevent pregnancy here. And yet people want to avoid having to go through with an abortion.
Yes.
They can't even prevent the pregnancy to begin with. It's
And
very
and
frustrating.
yes, and that's the thing, and that's, the next thing that they have on the chopping block is contraceptives. And really what this is all about is control. It's about the
Hmm.
government controlling, and I don't know if it's trying to control the population or, making sure that it doesn't, decrease too much, but all I know is that a lot of decisions are made in certain states, and well, in every state really, but more so in others, based on religious beliefs.
Hmm.
And the example of the Catholic Church, right? I mean, the Catholic hospital. It's like, no, if it's a hospital, Anybody else's religious beliefs should be irrelevant to what my health issue is and what my needs are as a woman and as a human.
Right, absolutely.
And I think that's one thing that just really gets under my skin, the people that, the really pro-life people who are really, like, really, you know, baby murderers and, like, really over
Mhm.
the top with it, you know? It's based on their own religion. God says that it's, that's a baby and you're killing your murderer. Well, let me deal with that. That's my, at the end of the day, if I believe in a higher power, I'll deal with that when it's my time, but for someone else to look at me and say, you can't do that because of my religious beliefs,
Right,
it's
absolutely.
insane. And there really needs to be more of a division, between church and state. I mean, there really needs to be. It has to be, because nobody should be forcing anybody to do anything based on someone else's religious beliefs. I mean, think about that for a second. In the United States of America, think about that. Like, I know this is going to be a very poor comparison, but because obviously the women in, say Iran or these other countries, they're definitely have it a lot worse than we American women do, right? But what's next? We can't, go on birth control. We can't have abortions. Their solution is, well, just don't have sex. Well, I'm sorry. As a woman of consent, a woman, I have the right to have sex for pleasure if I want to.
Hmm.
And they are trying, I don't, they're trying to control that you only have sex when you want to procreate. And that's just not, doesn't go, that's not human nature. Human nature, yes, we want to procreate, but human nature is love and affection. It's normal for teenagers and young people to have these urges, and it's normal. And you know, teaching abstinence is just teaching ignorance, in my opinion. You know,
Absolutely.
these kids need to know sex education at an appropriate age, appropriate times. And, I'm sorry, but girls have got to stop being shamed for being sexual beings. If women are, enjoy sex, oh, she's a whore because she enjoys sex. I mean, think about that for a second. We're human, right? Why are women demonized for wanting sex but not wanting to have a child after? you know, it's really frustrating to me. But I understand where your point is too, is that you think it could possibly be a good thing because, now people are going to be more mindful about who they vote for, or politics in the future. But what about now? What about the millions of children that are being victimized right now, that, a month from now they're going to find out that they're pregnant?
Hmm.
And what's going to happen? You know, I I just don't understand how. And let me just say this, and I know I'm going a little bit back and forth, going from talking about women who do have the capacity to consent and want sex and underage. Um, but it's really important because, oh, I think I just, so everybody doesn't know this. Little bit of a thing here. So just an FYI to everyone who's watching and listening, that I found out that I'm having seizures. So there are times when I'm talking and I just stop talking and I lose my train of thought. And I just had that moment. So please forgive me, but I'm going to try to get it back here. Um, I think I was saying, I don't remember. Can you remind me?
You were saying that you were bouncing back and forth between being of consenting age and being sexually active and being. Not able
Thank
to
you.
consent. Yes.
Thank you. Um, but I want to go back to the underage girls for a moment because um, I've had the pleasure of meeting some pretty remarkable people when I had to be admitted to a, for lack of better words, a here we go again, a trauma facility um, because of my PTSD, and it was so active. And I met someone who had a child at 12 years old. It was her brother's child,
Hmm.
and her parents forced her to have this child at 12 years old, and she gave this child up for adoption. And what I want people to understand is, and this is, not just me, this is like from people that I've talked to that have experienced this. That experience is even more traumatizing because now she has this child out in the world that she's never met. Now she fears that this child could be like the dad. Um, and I just don't see in any scenario how anybody could possibly force a 10, 11, or 12-year-old to be a mom. Like, that's just crazy to me that there's nothing to say if you're raped or a victim of sexual assault or incest. You just don't get a choice. And or not that you don't get a choice, because of course you have the choice, but the state that you live in, you may have to travel hundreds of miles to do what you need to do. And it really hurts my heart, you know, when I think about it. It really does. It really does. So, how do you think you would handle if your daughter came to you and said, Mom, I have something to tell you? I mean, how do you think you would handle that right now? Knowing what you know, knowing how difficult it was for you, knowing all of that, how would you respond?
Well, I think first of all, I would probably be slightly upset because she's been on birth control for a
Oh,
couple of years now.
yeah.
I'm at least third or fourth generation teen pregnancy in my family.
hmm
So when my daughter turned about 14 was when I put her on contraception and we took it together, and that was how I chose to handle it. I don't even think she's kissed yet.
Yes,
She's
thank God.
waiting for
Keep it that way.
everything. It's wonderful. um but I would like to think I would be like my dad, because I wouldn't have been able to do anything if it wasn't for him. I worry that I probably would have initially had a bit of a panic attack.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
But I definitely would have supported any decision. I definitely would have supported any decision.
Right. And you see, I love that that was your answer. I love that that was your answer because that's what it's all about, giving women a choice, letting women decide what they do, And here's the thing, if the truth is if either of my daughters came to me right now at 20 or 17, of course the first thing that I would ask them is, what do you want to do? And if they wanted to keep the child, I would support that. I need to make that clear too.
Right, of
You
course.
know, but I'm just not going to automatically just determine that nope, I can't, just as I can't say to my daughter, nope, you're pregnant, I don't want you to have that baby, you better go get an abortion. I can't do that. Just, you have to, it's all about supporting women's rights to decide what is right for them. And that includes our young teen girls. They need to know that they have a choice. And if my daughter said, "Hey, I want to keep it," then guess what? I'm going to be a happy grandma, And I just never want them to feel like they have no choice, no other option, you know?
Right, absolutely. And I mean, I don't approve of overturning Roe versus Wade. When I was saying that stuff about voting locally, that's me trying to be as taking as an optimistic approach as possible with the situation in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we all know that I know this isn't a political podcast, so I'm not going to get super political, but we all know how taxes work.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
do not go directly to the people that need them.
No, of course not. Yeah.
So if this is a step in the direction where funds can go more local, think if you think long run in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
it could in the long run turn out to be better, even though it absolutely is not better right now by any means.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you there. I completely agree with you there. What is your take on the rape and incest, the lack of an exception for that? I mean, are you
Oh, I completely agree with you.
yeah.
Completely agree with you. I actually just watched a movie that was based on a true story that took place in Austria,
Ooh.
and was gonna talk to you about maybe doing an episode on that in the future, where
Okay.
a girl was kept in her basement by her father
Oh, wow.
and had, I believe, 6 children by him.
Oh my god.
Mhm.
Oh my god.
And it wasn't even, I mean, even if she had had the choice, and even if they had physical ailments because of being a product of incest and because of the abuse, and um I just can't even imagine. And I think back to my own experiences, and I just can't even imagine having to go through that and having
Yeah.
to keep going and not
Yeah.
having the option.
Right. But deep down, and I'm thinking about Casey, what's her name? She was like for 18 years. She was missing, but this wasn't a family member or a father. This was just a crazy person. But abducted her and kept her for 18 years, and she had multiple children. And she expressed that even though it was through rape, she still loves her children, you
Mhm.
know? But that was her. She didn't have a choice to get an abortion. She had to have the kids, right? She had to do it. But, I respect that too. It's that was her, she gets to make that decision. And sometimes, but that's what I want to say. Women should have the right to make a decision. Anytime a right to make a decision is taken away, that's the problem. A decision they should always have a choice. And, so that's really what I'm fighting for. And I hope honestly that, here's the thing, women are strong, grown women, they can handle themselves, right? If they have to, go to another state to get an abortion, then whatever I'm worried about these young kids who are victims of rape and incest, who are going to be forced to have babies because their parents or whomever doesn't believe that they have a choice. That's like my biggest fear. I worry about that more than anything,
Mhm.
you know? But really, the truth is that the beautiful thing about this is that even if we don't see eye to eye, on these things, everybody here in the Survivor Strong community, We can still love, respect, and encourage each other. So I don't want anyone to think that, if they have a varying or different belief than I have, that we can't be friends anymore. That's not the case. I actually welcome as many people as possible to have this conversation. I want to debate this issue with people, um, just to not to debate to argue, but debate to learn, because I want to know what your opinion is and where that thought process comes from. And I just hope that you give me the same opportunity to share mine. Stitch, I want to thank you so much for popping on tonight and being a guest. I'm so glad. This was one conversation that I was hoping that I would have someone to talk about it with, and you came through. So
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you
It's
for
a great
that.
conversation to have. I'm so glad that you did decide to cover this topic. It's so important to talk about.
Yes, well, thank you. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight and sharing your thoughts and opinions on the issue. And again, even if we don't see eye to eye on this issue, we can still love, respect, support, and encourage each other right here on Survivor Strong. And we will be back on Wednesday, July 20th at 7 p.m. right here live on Fireside and Facebook. So make sure you come and check us out. And so you've been listening to episode 10 of Survivor Strong. Remember, you got this. We're all in this together. Until next time.